My name is Amara, and at 32 years old, I have mastered the art of becoming invisible. To the world, I am a ghost. To my family, I am a cautionary tale. But to the financial district, I am the managing partner of Obsidian Capital. Growing up in Atlanta as the dark-skinned daughter in a colorist family meant I had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. My mother Joyce and my sister Shanice treated me like a regrettable overhead cost while treating themselves like royalty. The restaurant for Hunter's celebration dinner was Le Bernadin, one of the most exclusive spots in the city. The air smelled of truffles and old money. My mother Joyce sat beaming at Hunter like he was the Messiah returned to earth. Hunter was a 35-year-old white man with the kind of confidence that only comes from never being told no. He had sandy blonde hair and a jawline that compensated for his lack of intellect. He snapped his fingers at the sommelier. "Bring us your finest bottle of Chateauneuf du Pape," he announced loudly, mispronouncing every single syllable of the French name. The sommelier winced, but forced a polite smile. I spoke fluent French and knew that the vintage Hunter just ordered was overpriced vinegar, but I said nothing. I just watched him swirl the glass and pretend to smell notes of oak that were not there. "So Hunter, tell us about the new position," my mother chirped. "Vice President of Sales," Hunter said, leaning back and spreading his arms. "Nexara AI is the future, Joyce. We are talking about neural networks and deep learning algorithms. I am going to revolutionize their entire revenue stream." I took a small bite of my bread. I knew for a fact that Nexara AI was currently bleeding cash and riddled with internal corruption, which was exactly why my firm had quietly acquired 51% of their stock over the last 3 months. We were planning a complete purge of the executive suite. Hunter had been hired by the outgoing sales director, who was currently under investigation for embezzlement. Hunter was not a savior. He was a pawn I was about to sacrifice. "Is Amara even listening?" Shanice asked, kicking me under the table. "You should take notes, Amara. Maybe if you listened to successful men like Hunter, your little business would not have collapsed." "It did not collapse," I said calmly. I pivoted. "Pivot is just a fancy word for quit." Hunter laughed. He reached over and patted my hand condescendingly. "Hey, do not feel bad. Once I get settled in the C-suite, I will see if we need someone to man the front desk. $15 an hour plus dental. It is a good start." The table erupted in laughter. My mother wiped a tear from her eye. "You are so generous, Hunter. Amara, you should thank him." I remained silent. The waiter arrived with the bill. It was tucked into a leather folder. Hunter reached for it with a dramatic flair, but Shanice snatched it first. "No, baby! You are the guest of honor," she cooed. "We are celebrating you." She opened the folder and her eyes widened slightly. $2,500. She looked at our mother. Then she looked at me with a smirk that I knew all too well. "Amara, you get this one," Shanice said, sliding the black leather folder across the white tablecloth toward me. "Excuse me," I asked. "Consider it a penalty fee," Shanice said, fixing her lipstick. "You were 10 minutes late. You wore that hideous hoodie to a 5-star restaurant, and honestly, you have been mooching off our emotional support for years. Use some of that savings from your failed company. Do not let Hunter think we are cheap. Do it, Amara." My mother added, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Do not ruin this night. Hunter is the future of this family. You are just the baggage." I looked at the bill. $2,500 for a dinner where I had eaten one piece of bread and been insulted 5 times. I reached into my purse and pulled out my black credit card. I had covered it in a silly cartoon sticker so they would not recognize it was a Centurion card, the kind invite-only card that requires millions in annual spending. I handed it to the waiter. "Keep the receipt," I said softly. Hunter chuckled. "Look at that. The little failure is trying to act like a big shot." "That is cute." I stood up. "I have a headache. I am leaving." "Don't expect a ride," my mother said. "We are going to the club to celebrate properly." I walked out of the restaurant into the cool night air. The valet was waiting. I walked past the line of Uber drivers and rounded the corner to a secluded alleyway where a blacked-out Maybach was idling. The driver stepped out and opened the door. "Good evening, Ms. Jones. Where to?" "Home," I said, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of success and solitude. I pulled off the hoodie, revealing the silk blouse underneath. I picked up my encrypted phone and dialed my assistant. "Did you enjoy the dinner, boss?" Marcus asked, his voice crisp over the line. "It was enlightening," I said, watching the city lights blur past the tinted window. "Status report. We have finalized the acquisition papers," Marcus said. "The board meeting is set for Monday morning at 9 sharp. Also, our background check on Hunter came back. It is worse than we thought. He lied on his resume about his MBA, and he has a gambling debt of $40,000 in Atlantic City." I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the engine soothe my nerves. I remembered 5 years ago standing in my mother's kitchen, asking for a $5,000 loan to trademark my first software patent. My mother had laughed in my face. She said she could not waste money on my hobbies. 2 weeks later, she gave Shanice $50,000 for a trip to Europe to find herself. Shanice came back with a tan and a fake designer bag. I came back with a hunger that could burn down cities. "And there is one more thing," Marcus added hesitantly. "Our credit monitoring system just flagged an inquiry. Hunter just applied for a high-interest payday loan. He listed himself as a VP of Nexara, and he listed you as the guarantor." I opened my eyes. "He did what?" "He used your social security number," Marcus said. "He must have found it in your old tax documents at your mother's house. He forged your signature as a co-signer." I stared at the phone. A cold smile spread across my face. "He just committed federal wire fraud and identity theft. Let the loan go through Marcus." "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. "Yes," I said. "I want the paper trail to be undeniable. When I crush him, I want to make sure there is no dust left behind." The car pulled up to my building. It was not the crumbling apartment complex my family thought I lived in. It was the Obsidian Tower, a skyscraper I owned. I maintained a small studio apartment in a bad neighborhood just to keep up appearances for my family, but tonight I was too tired for the charade. I needed my real home. But as I unlocked my phone, a notification from my security system popped up. "Motion detected at Sector B." Sector B was the studio apartment. I frowned. I tapped the camera feed. On the screen, I saw Shanice and Hunter. They were in my studio apartment. My mother had a spare key for emergencies, and she must have given it to them. "Driver, take me to the studio," I commanded. 20 minutes later, I stormed into the small, dusty apartment. Shanice was standing on a chair, taping streamers to the ceiling. Hunter was sitting on my desk, his feet resting on my stack of research papers. Boxes of wedding favors were piled high, blocking the hallway. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice trembling with controlled rage. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Hunter said, not moving his feet. "We needed a storage space for the wedding gifts and supplies. Your mom said you wouldn't mind. This place is a dump anyway. It is basically a storage unit with a bed." "You have no right to be here," I said, stepping forward. "Get your feet off my desk." Hunter laughed. He reached down and picked up a leather-bound notebook from my desk. It contained the handwritten architecture for a new algorithmic trading platform I was designing. It was worth millions. "What is this?" Hunter asked, flipping through the pages. "God, your handwriting is messy. Is this your diary?" "Dear diary, today I failed again." He tossed the notebook to Shanice, who caught it and giggled. "Give that back," I said, reaching for it. Shanice held it out of reach. "Relax, Amara, we are actually doing you a favor. Hunter was looking at your little scribbles. He says some of this makes no sense, but he is willing to fix it for you. He can teach you how real business works." Hunter hopped off the desk. "Yeah, I took a picture of a few pages. I might use them as a bad example in my presentation on Monday. How not to structure code, as a joke." My blood ran cold. He had taken photos. He was going to try to pass off my proprietary code as his own work at the board meeting. He was going to plagiarize the very person who owned the company he was trying to impress. "You took photos?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "Yeah," Hunter said, shrugging. Sue me? Oh, wait, you can't afford a lawyer. Shanice threw the notebook onto the floor near a pile of trash. Now be a good little sister and help us unload the rest of the champagne from the car. And do not break anything. This is high-end stuff, not what you are used to. I looked at the notebook lying in the dust. I looked at Hunter's smug face. I looked at my sister who treated my sanctuary like a dumpster. I bent down and picked up the notebook. I dusted it off. I will not help you, I said. Get out. You can't kick us out, Hunter sneered. Your name is on the lease, but your mom pays the rent, right? Wrong. I paid the rent. I paid for everything. I paid off my mother's mortgage anonymously last year. I paid for Shanice's car insurance through a shell company. They were living on my charity and spitting in my face. Fine, I said. Stay. Use the room. I will go. I walked to the door. Hunter called out after me. Hey Amara, seriously. Don't be late for the wedding. We need someone to guard the gift table so nothing gets stolen. I closed the door behind me. I walked down the hallway listening to their laughter fade. I pulled out my phone and called Marcus again. Change of plans, I said. Prepare the legal team and get the forensic accountants ready. Hunter just stole intellectual property. I am going to let him present it on Monday. You want him to present your work? Marcus asked, confused. Yes, I said, stepping into the elevator. I want him to stand up in front of the board and claim he wrote my code. I want him to dig his own grave so deep that he will never climb out. And Marcus cancel my mother's monthly stipend. Tell the bank there was a processing error. Let us see how much they love Hunter when the checks stop clearing. Monday morning arrived with a gray sky and a threat of rain. I woke up at 5 a.m. in my penthouse. I showered and put on my armor. A white bespoke suit from Italy, diamond stud earrings, my hair pulled back in a severe, flawless bun. I did not look like the sister in the hoodie. I looked like a shark. I drove myself to Nexara headquarters. The security guard at the gate saluted me. Good morning, Ms. Jones. Good morning, Earl. Is the new VP here yet? Yes, ma'am. He parked in the handicapped spot. Said he was important. I smirked. Tow it. I walked into the building. The lobby was buzzing. Everyone knew a takeover had happened, but nobody knew who the new owner was. Rumors were flying. I took the private elevator to the top floor. The boardroom was glass-walled, overlooking the entire city. The table was mahogany long enough to seat 20 people. I walked in and sat at the head of the table. My team of lawyers and analysts sat on my left. The existing executives of Nexara sat on my right, looking terrified. At 9 o'clock sharp, the door opened. Hunter walked in. He was wearing the same suit he wore to dinner. He was carrying a leather briefcase and a coffee cup. He did not look at the head of the table. He was too busy high-fiving the director of operations. Gentlemen, Hunter announced loudly, setting his coffee down. Ready to rock and roll. I have got a presentation that is going to blow your minds. I stayed up all weekend working on this. He fumbled with his laptop, connecting it to the projector. The screen flickered to life. The first slide appeared. It was a direct copy of the page he had photographed from my notebook. He had typed it out, but the logic was undeniably mine. I cleared my throat. Hunter didn't look up. Just a sec. Technical difficulties. Excuse me, Mr. Brooks, I said, my voice projecting across the silent room. Hunter froze. He knew that voice. He slowly turned his head. His eyes traveled from my Jimmy Choo heels, up my white suit, to my face. Amara. His jaw dropped. He looked around the room, waiting for someone to kick me out. What are you doing here? He hissed. Did you follow me? Security. Why is the cleaning lady sitting in the chair's seat? The room went deathly silent. The CEO of Nexara, a man named Robert Vance, turned pale. He looked at Hunter, then he looked at me. Hunter, Robert whispered. That is not the cleaning lady. That is Ms. Jones. She is the chairman of Obsidian Capital. She owns this building. She owns this company. Hunter laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. Good joke, Bob. Seriously, Amara, get out before I call the cops. You are embarrassing me. I leaned forward, interlacing my fingers. Please proceed with your presentation. Hunter, I said coolly. I am dying to hear about this code you wrote. Specifically the part where you solve the latency issue in the third paragraph. Walk me through your math. Hunter looked at the screen. He looked at me. He realized the code on the screen was the same code he had mocked in my apartment. He didn't understand a single line of it. I, he stammered. You can't, I said, standing up. Because you didn't write it. You stole it from my desk on Saturday night while you were trespassing in my apartment. That's a lie, Hunter screamed, slamming his hand on the table. She is lying. She is just a jealous, unemployed loser. Mr. Brooks, I said, my voice turning to ice. As of this morning, I have acquired 51% of Nixara. My first act as owner is a comprehensive audit of all new hires. We found your fake MBA. We found your gambling debts. And we found the loan application you forged my signature on yesterday. 2 police officers stepped out from the shadows in the corner of the room. Hunter Brooks, I said, pointing to the door. You are fired, and you are under arrest. Hunter looked at the police, then he looked at me. His face turned red, then purple. He opened his mouth and let out a scream of pure primal terror. The boutique smelled of lavender and old money. It was one of those places in Buckhead where they did not put price tags on the gowns, because if you had to ask, you clearly could not afford it. I stood by the velvet curtain holding Shanice's purse, her phone and her Starbucks cup, like the glorified assistant I was supposed to be. My mother Joyce was sitting on a plush pink sofa, sipping complimentary champagne and looking at her eldest daughter with tears in her eyes. Shanice stepped out of the dressing room. She was wearing a mermaid silhouette gown covered in hand-stitched lace. I had to admit, she looked stunning. The dress hugged her curves perfectly, and the diamond-white fabric made her skin glow. She spun around, admiring herself in the tri-fold mirror. "It is perfect!" my mother gasped, clutching her chest. "You look like a queen baby. Hunter is going to faint when he sees you." Shanice smirked at her reflection. I know, right? It cost $12,000, but Hunter said budget is not an issue. He is an executive now. We represent the Nixara brand. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. Hunter had not even received his first paycheck yet, and they were spending money he did not have. But I stayed silent. Okay, Amara, your turn, Shanice said, snapping her fingers at me. The attendant has your dress in the back. Go put it on. I want to see how the colors coordinate. The sales attendant, a young woman who looked like she pitied me, handed me a garment bag. It was heavy. I walked into the small, cramped changing room assigned to bridesmaids and unzipped the bag. I stared at the fabric in horror. It was yellow. Not a nice pastel lemon yellow or a rich golden saffron. It was the color of spicy brown mustard that had been left out in the sun for 3 days. The fabric was a stiff, scratchy polyester that felt like a cheap tablecloth. I took off my silk blouse and forced myself into the monstrosity. It was tight in the arms and loose in the waist, giving me the shape of a deflated balloon. The ruffles around the neck were itchy. I looked in the mirror. I looked ridiculous. I stepped out into the viewing area. The silence was immediate. Shanice covered her mouth to hide a giggle. Oh, wow. It is certainly striking. My mother set down her champagne glass and tilted her head. She looked me up and down with a critical eye. Well, Joyce said slowly, it is the best option for your body type, Amara. The ruffles hide your stomach. You know you have put on weight since your little business failed. Stress eating, I assume. I haven't gained weight, I said quietly. I actually run 5 miles every morning. This dress is just 2 sizes too small in the shoulders and 3 sizes too big in the hips. Don't argue with your mother, Shanice snapped. We chose that color because it makes the bride pop. You are supposed to be in the background, Amara. You are the supporting cast. My mother nodded in agreement. Exactly. Look at your sister Amara. She has the figure of a model. You have always been a bit more sturdy. This dress covers up your flaws. You should be grateful Shanice even asked you to be in the wedding, considering you can't even afford to pay for the dress yourself. Hunter is covering the cost for you. You need to know your place and just say thank you. I looked at my mother. Her words were not just an observation, they were a weapon. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed seeing me in a hideous dress being told I was ugly and poor. She enjoyed the hierarchy where Shanice was the princess and I was the frog. Thank you, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. It is a lovely color. Shanice clapped her hands. Great. Go take it off. I need you to run across the street and get us some salads. I am starving. I went back into the dressing room. I needed a moment. My hands were shaking not from sadness, but from adrenaline. I wanted to rip the dress to shreds. I wanted to tell them that the silk blouse I had just taken off cost more than this entire wedding budget. I wanted to tell them that I owned the building this boutique was renting space in, but not yet. The trap was not fully sprung. I struggled out of the yellow nightmare and put my own clothes back on. I grabbed my purse and slipped out the back exit of the dressing area, intending to use the restroom before facing them again. The hallway behind the showroom was quiet, lined with racks of inventory. As I passed the employee break room, I heard a familiar voice. It was Hunter. He was not supposed to be here. The groom was not allowed to see the dress. But there he was, pacing back and forth in the loading dock area, phone pressed to his ear. I stopped. I pressed my back against the wall, hidden by a rack of winter coats. Yeah, man, I know it is risky, Hunter was saying. His voice was loud and boastful, the way men talk when they are trying to impress their friends. But you should see the rock I bought. 5 carats. Shut up, she loves it. She thinks I paid cash. He paused, listening to the person on the other line. He laughed, a cruel, harsh sound. Dude, are you kidding me? I am not going to marry her. Shanice is a headache. She is high maintenance and her mother is a nightmare. I just need to keep the engagement going until after the quarterly bonus hits. Once I secure my position at the board meeting on Monday and get that signing bonus, I am out. My heart hammered in my chest. He was not just using her for status. He was planning to leave her at the altar. What about the debt, his friend must have asked. Hunter lowered his voice, but in the quiet hallway I heard every word. That is the best part. I took out a massive line of credit to pay for the ring and the deposit on the venue. But I put everything in Amara's name. Yeah, the ugly sister. She is dumb as rocks, man. I slipped a guarantee form in with some job application papers I told her I was helping her with. She signed it without even reading it. I covered my mouth to stifle a gasp. Yeah, Hunter continued. So when I skip town next month, the bank comes after the sister. She will be bankrupt, and Shanice will be devastated, and I will be in Miami with a clean slate and 100 grand in my pocket. It is the perfect crime. These people are so desperate to be seen as rich they will sign anything. It is like winning the ghetto lottery. He laughed again. I stood there in the shadows, trembling. It was not just about disrespect anymore. It was not just about my mother favoring Shanice. This was criminal. Hunter was planning to destroy my credit, ruin my sister's life, and humiliate my family on a public scale. He called us the ghetto lottery. I slowly backed away. I walked back to the dressing room. I looked at myself in the mirror. My mother was right about one thing. I did know my place. My place was at the head of the table, and on Monday morning, I was going to make sure Hunter realized exactly who he had just tried to rob. I walked back out to the showroom. Shanice was still admiring herself. My mother was beaming. Did you get the salads? Shanice asked, not looking at me. Not yet. I said, my voice steady and calm. I just realized I forgot my wallet in the car. I will be right back. Take your time, my mother said, waving her hand. We are just enjoying the moment. I walked out of the store. I did not go to the car. I took out my phone and dialed my forensic accountant. It is Amara, I said. I want you to pull the security footage from the boutique's loading dock for the last 10 minutes. We have a confession on tape, and prepare the eviction notice for my mother's house. I have a feeling she is going to need to find a new place to live very soon. I hung up and looked at the bridal shop window. I saw my sister laughing inside, unaware that the man she worshipped was planning to leave her with nothing but shame. For a split second I felt pity, but then I remembered the yellow dress. I remembered the years of being called the ugly one, the failure, the burden. I got into my car. The engine roared to life. Let the wedding bells ring, I whispered to myself, but the funeral is going to be so much more entertaining. Thursday afternoon hung over the city of Atlanta like a wet wool blanket. Inside the gleaming glass tower of Nexara AI, the air conditioning was set to a freezing temperature, but Hunter was sweating. He sat in his corner office, a space he had occupied for less than a week, staring at his computer screen with the desperation of a man watching a tsunami approach from the beach. His boss, a man named Sterling, who had been handpicked by the new ownership group, stood in the doorway. Sterling was a man of few words and even fewer smiles. He leaned against the doorframe, checking his watch with a deliberate slowness that made Hunter's stomach churn. "The board meeting is in 48 hours," Hunter Sterling said, his voice smooth and cold. "The new owners are expecting a revolution. They bought this company because they believe we have untapped potential. If you go in there on Monday with buzzwords and corporate jargon, they will eat you alive. I need something tangible. I need the algorithm you promised during your interview." Hunter swallowed hard, tugging at the collar of his expensive Italian shirt. It was tight. Everything felt tight suddenly. During his interview, he had bluffed his way through using terms he had heard on tech podcasts and relying on his charisma. He had assumed that once he got the job, he could just delegate the actual work to some underpaid engineer in the basement. But Sterling had cut off his access to the engineering team. He had said that for this project, the VP needed to demonstrate personal competency. "I am putting the finishing touches on it now," Hunter lied, flashing his winning smile. "It is going to be game-changing. Just ironing out a few bugs in the code." Sterling did not smile back. He just stared at Hunter for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Good," Sterling said. "Do not disappoint me. The new chairwoman has a reputation for firing executives before they even finish their morning coffee." Sterling turned and walked away. Hunter waited until he was gone before collapsing back into his leather chair. He put his head in his hands. He had nothing. He had absolutely nothing. He looked at the blank PowerPoint presentation on his screen. He looked at the complex lines of code the previous VP had left behind, which looked like alien hieroglyphics to him. He was going to be exposed. He was going to lose the salary, the bonus, the title, and the respect of Shanice's family. Then he remembered the notebook. He remembered the leather-bound journal he had stolen from Amara's desk on Saturday night. He remembered the pages filled with her messy handwriting, the flowcharts, the equations she had scribbled down during her failed startup phase. He had laughed at them then, but he remembered seeing the words predictive revenue modeling and latency reduction. He scrambled for his briefcase. He pulled out the photos he had taken on his phone. He zoomed in on the images. The handwriting was cramped and difficult to read. There were symbols he did not recognize. He tried to type them out, but he kept making mistakes. He did not know where the brackets went. He did not know if the variable was an X or a Y. He needed a translator. He needed the person who wrote it. He checked the time. It was 4 o'clock. He grabbed his keys and ran out of the office. He drove his leased Mercedes aggressively through the rush-hour traffic, cutting off sedans and honking at pedestrians. He needed to get to Amara's studio before she went out to whatever imaginary job she pretended to have. When he arrived at the rundown apartment building, he did not buzz the intercom. He used the spare key Shanice had given him. He marched down the hallway, the smell of stale cooking oil and dust filling his nose. This was where his future sister-in-law lived. It was pathetic. And yet this pathetic place held the key to his survival. He banged on the door and opened it without waiting for an answer. Amara was sitting at her small kitchen table nursing a cup of tea and reading a paperback novel. She looked up, her expression mild and unsurprised, as if she had been expecting a storm to blow through her door. "Hunter," she said calmly. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Did you forget more party supplies?" Hunter did not apologize for barging in. He paced the small room, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. He needed to frame this correctly. He could not look desperate. He had to look like a benefactor. "I am here to help you, Amara," he announced, stopping in front of her table. "You are here to help me," Amara repeated, setting down her book. "Yes," Hunter said, putting his hands on his hips. "Look, I have been thinking about you. I know you are struggling. I know this startup failure hit you hard. And honestly, it is embarrassing for Shanice to have a sister who is, well, doing nothing." "I am not doing nothing," Amara said softly. Hunter waved his hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. You are drifting. But I am a generous guy. I want to give you a purpose." He pulled his laptop out of his bag and slammed it onto her table, pushing her teacup aside. "I am working on a major presentation for the board of directors," he lied effortlessly. "It is high-level stuff. Visionary. But I am a big-picture guy. I don't have time to type up all the grunt work. I remembered those little scribbles in your notebook. They were cute. Elementary, but they had a decent structure." He paused, waiting for her to look grateful. Amara just stared at him with those dark, unreadable eyes. "So here is the deal," Hunter continued, leaning in. "I am going to let you type this up for me. I need you to take those notes from your journal, the ones I took pictures of, and format them into a professional slide deck. Clean up the math. Make it look like something a VP would present." "And why would I do that?" Amara asked. "You stole those notes, Hunter." "Borrowed," Hunter corrected sharply. "I borrowed them to see if you had any potential. And if you do a good job tonight, if you make me look good on Monday, I will talk to HR." He grinned, playing his ace card. "We need someone to manage the break room on the executive floor. You know, making sure the coffee pots are full, ordering bagels, wiping down the counters? It pays $15 an hour. It is a foot in the door, Amara. You could finally pay your own rent instead of leeching off your mother." The insult hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He was asking her to commit intellectual property theft against herself, to hand over her genius in exchange for a job cleaning up after him. Amara looked at the laptop. She looked at Hunter's arrogant, desperate face. She saw the sweat on his upper lip. She saw the fear behind his eyes. She stood up slowly. She walked to the window and looked out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. Hunter tapped his foot impatiently. "Well," he demanded, "do you want the job or not? I am offering you a lifeline here." Amara turned back. A small, shy smile played on her lips. It was the smile of a predator mimicking prey. "You are right, Hunter," she said softly. "I need a fresh start. And I would love to work at Nexara. Even just making coffee would be a dream for me." Hunter let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He clapped his hands together. "Great. Smart choice. Now get to work. I need this done by tomorrow morning. Don't mess it up." He typed in his password and stepped back. Amara sat down at the laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I will make sure it is perfect," she promised. "I will make sure it is exactly what you deserve." Hunter watched her for a moment, making sure she was actually working, then checked his phone. "I have to go meet Shanice for a tasting. Text me when it is done." And Amara, "Yes, Hunter. Don't try to get creative. Just type what is there. I don't need your failed ideas polluting my strategy." "I understand," Amara said, her eyes fixed on the screen. Hunter left the door, slamming shut behind him. He whistled as he walked down the hallway, feeling like a genius. He had just outsourced his work for free and solved his family drama in one move. Inside the apartment, the silence returned. Amara stopped typing. The shy smile vanished, replaced by a look of cold, calculated intensity. She opened the file. She looked at the code Hunter wanted her to transcribe. It was a brilliant piece of architecture she had designed years ago, but it had a flaw. She had fixed it in later versions, the versions that built Obsidian Capital. But for Hunter, she would not give him the fixed version. She began to type. Her fingers flew across the keys. She recreated the algorithm, but deep within the revenue projection model, she inserted a variable. It was a subtle change. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard growth multiplier. But to a board of directors, and specifically to the legal compliance software that Nexara used, it would look like something else entirely. It was a poison pill. The code she was writing explicitly bypassed the federal antitrust regulations of the Sherman Act. It was a direct admission of price-fixing logic hard-coded into the presentation. If Hunter presented this, he would not just look stupid. He would be standing in front of a room of billionaires and confessing to a federal crime, claiming it was his own brilliant idea. Amara typed the final line of code. She added a few flashy transition effects to the slides just the way incompetent executives liked them. "Done," she whispered to the empty room. She saved the file and emailed it to Hunter. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, imagining the scene on Monday morning. She could see the boardroom. She could see the confusion on the board members' faces. And she could see Hunter, confident and loud, walking straight into the wood chipper she had just turned on. "I will help you shine, Hunter," she said into the darkness. "I will light you up so bright you will burn the whole building down." I sat at the small, scratched kitchen table in my studio apartment, the blue light of the laptop screen illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Hunter was pacing behind me, eating a bag of chips and dropping crumbs onto the floor I had just swept. He was dictating nonsense, throwing out buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift, expecting me to type them verbatim. But I was not typing what he said. I was typing what he needed to say to destroy himself. I was constructing a slide deck that looked visually impressive. It had sleek graphs, bold fonts, and the Nexara AI color palette. But the content was a death sentence. I was building a revenue model based on collaborative market stabilization. To a layman, it sounded like a smart way to steady the industry. To the Federal Trade Commission, it was a textbook definition of price fixing, a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act that carried a 10-year prison sentence. I paused typing and looked up at him. "Hunter," I said, playing the part of the confused assistant. "Are you sure about this slide? The one where we propose meeting with competitors to agree on a pricing floor. Isn't that illegal?" Hunter laughed, spraying chip crumbs everywhere. "God, Amara, you are so small-minded. That is why your little startup failed. In the big leagues, we don't call it illegal. We call it strategic alignment. It is how the real players operate. Just type it. Make it sound professional." I suppressed a smile. He had just given me permission to load the gun he would use to shoot himself. I went back to typing. I intentionally made the language slightly clumsy. I wrote, "We should talk to our rivals to keep prices high." I knew Hunter's ego would not let that stand. I finished the draft and spun the laptop around. "Here's the first pass," I said. Hunter squinted at the screen. He scrolled through the pages, nodding at the colors, ignoring the data. Then he stopped at the price-fixing slide. "Ugh," he groaned. "This writing is terrible, Amara. Talk to rivals to keep prices high. You write like a third grader. Move over. Let me show you how an executive writes." He shoved me out of the chair and sat down. He cracked his knuckles theatrically. He highlighted my clumsy sentence and began to type. He frowned, biting his lip in concentration. "There," he said triumphantly. "Read that." I leaned over his shoulder. He had changed it to Nexara A. "I will lead a covert initiative to standardize pricing tiers across the sector, ensuring mutual profitability and eliminating undercutting." It was perfect. It was no longer just a suggestion, it was a declaration of intent to form a cartel. And because he had typed it himself, the keystroke logs on the company laptop would prove he was the author. "You are a genius, Hunter," I whispered. "That sounds so powerful." "I know," he said, closing the laptop with a snap. "That is why I am the VP, and you are the unemployed sister. It is about instinct." He stood up, grabbing his briefcase. "I am going to head out. Shanice is waiting for me. We are going to test drive Porsches tomorrow. You know, spending that bonus money before it even hits the account. He walked to the door, then paused. Oh, email that file to my personal account. I don't want to log into the work server from this dump. The Wi-Fi is probably insecure. I will send it right now, I said. Hunter left without a thank you. As soon as the door clicked shut, I pulled up the keystroke logger I had installed on his laptop remotely. I saved a copy of his edits. Then I opened my phone. I had cloned Hunter's phone to a secure server days ago. I watched a new text message thread pop up on my screen. It was to Shanice. Baby, I just left your sister's place. The girl is a donkey, a total moron. She just did 40 hours of work for me in 2 hours. She thinks I am going to get her a job, but honestly, I wouldn't hire her to scrub the toilets. I am going to crush this presentation. Promotion, here I come. Shanice replied instantly. Lol. At least she is finally useful for something. Did you get the file, Hunter? Yeah. She is sending it now. I am going to be a legend on Monday. I stared at the word donkey. I hit send on the email. The file whooshed away, carrying the poison pills straight to his inbox. You are right, Hunter, I said to the empty room. You are going to be a legend. They are going to teach case studies about your stupidity in law school for decades. Friday afternoon brought a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of my studio apartment. I was packing up some of my equipment, preparing to abandon this fake life when my phone rang. It was my mother. Amara, come to the house immediately, she demanded. Her voice was high and tight, vibrating with panic. I didn't ask why. I knew why. My financial team had triggered the next phase of the trap. When I arrived at my mother's sprawling suburban home, the atmosphere was suffocating. Shanice was crying on the sofa. Hunter was pacing the living room, his face pale and sweaty. My mother stood by the fireplace, her arms crossed, looking like a general facing defeat. What is going on? I asked, shaking the rain off my umbrella. It is a misunderstanding, Hunter blurted out. He looked wild. His hair was disheveled. It is not a misunderstanding, Shanice sobbed. The loan shark called Hunter. He said if you don't pay the $20,000 by 5 p.m., he is going to call the ethics board at Nexara. He knows about your gambling debt. Hunter spun on her. Shut up, Shanice. It is not a gambling debt. It is an investment gap. I leveraged some funds to buy crypto and the market dipped. I just need a bridge loan until Monday. Once the board sees my presentation, I get a $50,000 signing bonus. I can pay it all back. He turned to me. His eyes were desperate, pleading, but still held that spark of arrogance. Amara, we need your help. My help? I asked, feigning shock. I have nothing, Hunter. I am unemployed. Remember? My mother stepped forward. She put a hand on my shoulder, her grip heavy and demanding. We know you have that savings account, Amara. The money from when you sold the office furniture from your failed startup. You told me you had about $25,000 left. You were saving it for a down payment on a condo. I took a step back. That is my survival money, Mom. That is the only thing keeping me from being homeless. Hunter is family, Joyce said, her voice hardening. And he is in trouble. If this gets out, he loses the job. If he loses the job, Shanice loses her future. We all lose. So you want me to give him my entire life savings? I asked, my voice trembling. To pay off a gambling debt. It is an investment in the future, my mother insisted. When Hunter is rich, he will take care of you. He promised he would get you a job. I looked at Hunter. He nodded eagerly. Yeah, Amara. Absolutely. I will pay you back double. 50 grand. Just transfer the money. The guy is calling in 10 minutes. I looked at Shanice. She wiped her eyes and looked at me with expectation, as if my sacrifice was the most natural thing in the world. Do it, Amara, Shanice said. Don't be selfish. I looked at my mother one last time. I needed to hear her say it. I needed to know there was absolutely no love left in this house. Mom, I said softly, if I give him this money, I will have $0 in my bank account. If he doesn't pay me back, I won't be able to make rent. I will be on the street. Are you really asking me to set myself on fire to keep him warm? My mother didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. You are strong, Amara. You can handle being broke. You are used to it. Shanice isn't. She is delicate. She needs this lifestyle. Now pull out your phone and make the transfer. Something inside me snapped. It was the final tether that bound me to this woman. She wasn't my mother. She was just a woman who had birthed me and then sold me for parts. Okay, I said. My voice was calm, unnaturally calm. I pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. But I didn't open my personal savings account. I opened a specific sub-account attached to Obsidian Capital. It was a honeypot account. We used it for sting operations. Any money transferred from this account was digitally marked, and transferring it to pay off an illegal bookie would trigger an automatic suspicious activity report sent directly to the FBI and the SEC. I am sending it now, I said. I typed in the account number Hunter gave me. It was an offshore routing number. $20,000, I said. Just hit send. Hunter screamed. I pressed the button. Transfer complete. There, I said, showing them the screen. It is done. I am empty. Hunter collapsed onto the sofa, letting out a massive sigh of relief. You saved my life, Amara. Seriously. You are a good kid. My mother smiled, patting my cheek. I knew you would do the right thing. You finally made yourself useful. I put my phone back in my pocket. I felt a vibration. It was a notification from my security team. The trap was sprung. By accepting funds from a flagged corporate account to pay a criminal enterprise, Hunter had just elevated his crimes from civil fraud to federal money laundering. I am going to go now, I said, walking toward the door. Stay for dinner, my mother called out cheerfully. We are ordering sushi to celebrate. No thanks, I said, opening the door to the rain. I have a board meeting on Monday. I need to prepare. What board meeting? Shanice laughed. Are you interviewing for a janitor position? Something like that, I said. I walked out to my car. The rain washed over me, but I didn't feel cold. I felt the heat of the bridge burning behind me. Hunter thought he had just bought his freedom. He didn't realize he had just signed his confession. Monday morning was going to be a bloodbath. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in my penthouse living room as Sunday night bled into the early hours of Monday morning. I sat with a glass of sparkling water watching a live video feed that was being streamed directly to my private server. On the screen was the grainy but high-definition interior of the Vault, one of Atlanta's most exclusive private clubs. Hunter was sitting in a plush leather booth surrounded by 5 of his friends. These were men who looked exactly like him, wearing suits that were slightly too tight and laughing a little too loudly. The table in front of them was littered with empty crystal tumblers and a bottle of Macallan 25-year-old scotch that cost more than my mother's car. I knew exactly how he had paid for it. He had used the debit card linked to the account I had transferred the $20,000 into just hours ago. He was drinking my so-called life savings. He was toasting to his genius with the money he had guilted me out of to save his life. I watched as a server approached the table to refill the ice bucket. The server was a young man with a focused expression. To Hunter, he was just part of the furniture, invisible and insignificant. But to me, he was Luis, one of the top field operatives for the private security firm Obsidian Capital retained. Hidden in the button of Luis's vest was a high-resolution camera and a microphone that was capturing every single syllable Hunter spoke. Hunter stood up, swaying slightly. He held his glass high, sloshing amber liquid onto the expensive carpet. To the hustle boys, Hunter shouted his words slightly slurred, but dripping with arrogance. To the easiest payday of my life. His friends cheered. One of them, a guy named Chad, who I recognized as a failed real estate agent, clapped Hunter on the back. You are a legend, Hunt. I still can't believe you got them to cough up the cash. I thought you said the family was broke. Hunter laughed, dropping back onto the leather sofa. He loosened his tie. They are broke, Hunter said, leaning in as if sharing a state secret. That is the beauty of it. They are cash poor, but credit hungry. My fiancée, Shanice, she has zero liquid assets. Her credit score is mediocre. But she is so desperate to be a power couple, she will sign anything I put in front of her. And her mother, God Joyce, is a gold mine. I told her I needed investment capital, and she basically forced her other daughter to empty her bank account. I watched on the screen as he took a long sip of scotch. My hand tightened around my own glass. The other daughter, Chad asked. The quiet one. Yeah, the ugly one, Hunter sneered. Amara. She is a total loser. Failed business lives in a dump. But apparently she had a little nest egg. I told them a sob story about a loan shark and they panicked, handed it right over. 20 grand just like that. He gestured to the bottle of scotch. And tonight we are drinking on Amara's dime. The table erupted in laughter. It was an ugly guttural sound that echoed through the speakers of my laptop. But wait, Chad asked, leaning forward. What happens when the money runs out? Won't they expect you to pay it back when you get the big VP bonus? Hunter set his glass down. His face changed. The drunken sloppiness vanished for a second, replaced by a cold, predatory sharpness. There is no paying it back, Chad. That is the exit strategy. Tomorrow I walk into that boardroom. I dazzle the new owners with this presentation. I get my signing bonus, which is 50,000. Then I wait 2 weeks for the first paycheck to clear. And then I ghost. He made a motion with his hand, like a plane taking off. I am gone. I break up with Shanice, tell her the pressure was too much. I take the bonus. I take the cash I skimmed from the wedding deposits, and I move to Miami. But what about the debt? Chad asked. Hunter smiled. It was the smile of a wolf. It is all in their names. The wedding venue, Shanice's credit card. The engagement ring, a loan in Amara's name. The caterer, Joyce's home equity line. When I leave, the whole house of cards falls on them. It is what I call the ghetto lottery. He paused to let the insult sink in. These people, Hunter said, gesturing vaguely as if referring to my entire race. They are so desperate to ascend. They see a white guy in a suit and they think they have won the lottery. They think I am their ticket to the country club. They are so blinded by the image of success that they don't check the details. They let me in the front door, gave me the keys, and now I am going to rob the place blind, and they will thank me for the privilege right up until the moment I vanish. I froze the video. I stared at the image of Hunter's face on my screen. I looked at his smirk. I replayed the audio in my head. Ghetto lottery. It was not just greed. It was hate. It was a deep, systemic contempt for my family, for me, for who we were. He saw us as resources to be mined and discarded. He saw our ambition as a weakness to be exploited. I saved the video file. I encrypted it and uploaded it to the secure drive I would use in the boardroom. I did not feel anger anymore. Anger is hot and messy. What I felt was cold. It was the absolute zero of space. It was the clinical detachment of a surgeon preparing to amputate a gangrenous limb. I picked up my phone and texted Luis. Great work. Get the car ready for 7 a.m. I did not sleep that night. I spent the hours reviewing every single document, every single loan application, every single lie Hunter had told. I memorized his destruction. Monday morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sky over Atlanta was a pale, innocent blue. In the suburbs at my mother's house, Hunter was waking up. I knew this because I had hacked into the smart home system I had installed for my mother years ago. I could see the activity log. He woke up at 6:30. He took a long shower. He probably looked in the mirror and told himself he was a king. At 7 o'clock, he walked into the kitchen. I could imagine the smell of the coffee my mother had brewed for him. She would be treating him like a fragile genius on the day of his big battle. I pulled up the feed from the kitchen security camera. Hunter was wearing his navy blue suit. It was the one I had paid for indirectly. He looked fresh despite the alcohol he had consumed hours ago. Narcissism is a powerful antidote to a hangover. You look handsome, Hunter, my mother said, adjusting his tie. Go get them today. Show them who you are. I will, Joyce Hunter said, taking a sip of coffee. After today, everything changes. I am going to put this family on the map. Shanice walked in wearing her silk robe. She hugged him from behind. I am so proud of you, baby, she whispered. Call me as soon as you get out of the meeting. We need to put the deposit down on the honeymoon suite tonight. Hunter kissed her on the forehead. It was a Judas kiss, cold and perfunctory. Count on it, he said. By tonight we will be celebrating. He grabbed his briefcase, the briefcase that contained the laptop that contained the poison pill presentation I had written for him. He walked out the front door, strutting toward his leased car. He checked his reflection in the driver's side window, smoothing his hair. He looked like a man who owned the world. He had no idea that he was a dead man walking. I closed my laptop in my penthouse. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I watched the traffic beginning to build up on the highway, a river of red and white lights. Somewhere in that river was Hunter driving toward me. I turned and walked to my dressing room. My suit was waiting. It was white, stark, blinding white, the color of mourning in some cultures, the color of purity in others. Today, it was the color of a clean slate. I dressed slowly. I put on my diamond earrings. I applied my lipstick a deep crimson shade. I looked at myself in the mirror. I did not see the ugly sister. I did not see the failure. I saw the CEO of Obsidian Capital. I saw the woman who was about to drop the guillotine. I grabbed my bag. I walked to the elevator. Showtime, Hunter, I whispered. The elevator doors closed, sealing me in. The descent began. The hunt was over. The slaughter was about to begin. Monday morning did not just dawn. It arrived with the heavy, inevitable weight of judgment. But to Hunter Brooks, driving his leased Mercedes-Benz through the congested arteries of downtown Atlanta, the morning felt like a coronation. He drummed his fingers on the leather steering wheel to the beat of a rap song he did not understand, feeling the caffeine and narcissism surging through his veins. He pulled up to the curb in front of the Nexara AI headquarters. The building was a monolith of black glass and steel, piercing the skyline like a dark shard. It was intimidating to most people. To Hunter, it looked like a bank vault that someone had left unlocked just for him. He tossed the keys to the valet without making eye contact. Keep it close, he barked. I will be out by noon to celebrate. He adjusted his jacket. It was a navy blue Italian cut that he had purchased using the credit line I had unknowingly guaranteed. He smoothed his hair in the side mirror, checking his teeth. He looked the part. He looked like money. He took a deep breath of the city air, which smelled of exhaust and opportunity, and marched toward the revolving doors. The lobby of Nexara was a cathedral of capitalism. The ceilings were 30 feet high, and the floor was polished marble that clicked sharply under the heels of the rushing workforce. Hunter moved through the crowd with the aggressive stride of a man who believes pedestrians should part like the Red Sea. He did not dodge people. He expected them to dodge him. He approached the security desk. The receptionist was a young black woman with braids and a name tag that read Jasmine. She was on the phone typing rapidly, but she looked up with a polite professional smile as Hunter leaned over the counter, invading her personal space. I need a visitor pass for the executive suite, Hunter announced, cutting off her phone conversation. Hunter Brooks, Vice President of Sales. Jasmine blinked. She finished her call and hung up. Good morning, sir. Do you have your employee badge yet? HR is issuing it today, Hunter said, tapping his fingers impatiently on the marble counter. Just print me a temporary pass, and make it quick. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes, and if I am late, it is going to be your head on the chopping block. Jasmine typed his name into the system. Her brow furrowed slightly. I see your name here, Mr. Brooks, but the system has a flag on your file. It says pending security clearance. I cannot issue a pass until Hunter slammed his hand on the counter. The loud smack echoed through the lobby, causing several people to turn and look. Listen to me, sweetheart. Hunter hissed, his voice low and venomous. Do you know who I am? I am the man who is going to save this company. I am the man who signs your paycheck. Now you can either print the pass or you can pack your box. Which one do you want? Jasmine stared at him. Her eyes were hard. She was not intimidated. She was disgusted. But she pressed a button and a printer whirred to life. Here is a temporary pass, she said, sliding the plastic card across the counter. You need to verify with security on the 40th floor. Hunter snatched the card without a thank you. Learn your place, he muttered as he walked away. He did not see Jasmine pick up the phone and dial a number. He did not see her whisper, "He is on his way up." Hunter strode toward the elevator bank. He was checking his reflection in the polished brass of a decorative planter when he collided with someone. It was a heavy impact. Hot liquid splashed onto Hunter's pristine trousers. He jumped back, swearing loudly. You idiot! Watch where you are going! Standing in front of him was an older African-American man wearing a gray jumpsuit pushing a cleaning cart. The man had spilled a cup of coffee. A few drops had landed on the hem of Hunter's pants. The older man looked down at the spill, then up at Hunter. He had kind eyes surrounded by deep wrinkles, and he wore a hearing aid. My apologies, son. The man said, his voice raspy. I didn't see you turning the corner. Son, Hunter scoffed. He grabbed a napkin from the cart and furiously wiped at his leg. Don't call me son. Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? It costs more than you make in a year. The older man stood still, leaning on his mop handle. He did not look frightened. He looked observant. He looked at Hunter the way a scientist looks at a specimen in a jar. It is just a little coffee, the man said calmly. It will wash out. No need to raise your voice. Hunter threw the dirty napkin onto the floor right in front of the man's feet. I will raise my voice if I want to, Hunter spat. You are clumsy and you are old. Maybe it is time they put you out to pasture. What is your name? I am going to mention this to the facilities manager. The man tapped the name embroidered on his jumpsuit. It said, Earl. Well, Earl, Hunter sneered. Enjoy mopping up my mess. That is all you are good for. Hunter turned on his heel and pressed the elevator button. He did not look back. If he had looked back, he would have seen something terrifying. He would have seen Earl pull a sleek black smartphone from the pocket of his coveralls. He would have seen Earl type a quick message. The target has entered the elevator. He is exactly as arrogant as you predicted, Amara. Proceed with the termination. Hunter did not know that Earl was not a janitor. Earl was Earl Washington, one of the original founders of Nexara AI and a minority shareholder who liked to walk the floors incognito to test the character of new executives. Hunter had just failed the test before he even stepped into the room. The elevator ride was smooth and silent. Hunter watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30. His ears popped. He adjusted his tie one last time. He checked his teeth in the mirrored wall. He practiced his opening smile. Showtime, he whispered to his reflection. The elevator chimed at the 40th floor. The door slid open. The atmosphere here was different. The air was colder. The carpet was thicker, muffling his footsteps. The walls were lined with abstract art that looked expensive and severe. There was no bustle here, no ringing phones, just a heavy, oppressive silence. Hunter walked down the long corridor toward the double mahogany doors at the end. He felt a flicker of nervousness in his stomach, but he pushed it down. He had the presentation. He had the stolen code. He had the confidence of a con artist on the brink of the biggest score of his life. He reached the doors. He placed his hand on the brass handle. It felt like ice. He pushed the doors open and strode in. Gentlemen, Hunter announced, his voice booming with practiced charisma. Sorry, I am a minute late. I had to deal with some incompetence in the lobby. He stopped. The boardroom was massive. A long table of black obsidian stretched out before him. Around the table sat 12 people. They were not smiling. They were not looking at their phones. They were all looking at him. At the far end of the table, the chairman's chair was turned away, facing the floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the city. Hunter faltered for a second. The air in the room was freezing. It felt less like a meeting and more like an execution. "Right," Hunter said, clearing his throat. "Well, let's get started. I have prepared a vision for the future of Nexara that is going to blow you away." He walked to the podium and plugged in his laptop. The screen flickered. His presentation, the one I had sabotaged, popped up. The chair at the end of the table slowly began to swivel around. Hunter ignored it, focused on the screen. "As you can see here on slide 1, Hunter said, clicking the remote. "We need to be aggressive. We need to dominate." The chair finished turning. I sat there wearing my white suit, my hands clasped on the table. I stared directly at him. Hunter looked up. He blinked. He squinted. "Amara." The word escaped his lips like a gasp of air from a dying balloon. The door behind him clicked shut with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. The lock engaged. Hunter looked at the door, then back at me. His face went from confusion to disbelief to horror in the span of 3 seconds. "Hello, Hunter," I said softly, my voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "We have been waiting for you. Earl told me you were coming." "Who is—" Earl, Hunter whispered, backing away until his legs hit the podium. The door to the side opened, and the old janitor walked in. He was no longer wearing the jumpsuit. He was wearing a tuxedo. He walked over to the table and took the empty seat to my right. Hunter looked at the janitor. He looked at me. He looked at the presentation on the screen, which was suddenly flashing a red warning banner. "Federal compliance violation detected." "Please sit down, Hunter," I said, gesturing to a small lone chair in the center of the room. "We have a lot to discuss. Specifically, the money you stole from my mother and the federal crime you are about to confess to on that screen." Hunter dropped his clicker. It hit the floor with a crack. The lion's den had just closed its jaws. "Please sit down, Hunter," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the acoustic perfection of the boardroom. Although I was facing the window, I could hear the scrape of the chair legs against the floor as Hunter sat. He was nervous. I could practically smell the ozone scent of his anxiety mixing with his expensive cologne. "You may begin your presentation." Hunter cleared his throat. It was a wet, ragged sound. He stood up and smoothed his jacket, trying to regain the swagger he had walked in with. He clicked the remote, and the first slide of the presentation I had sabotaged appeared on the massive 8K screen behind him. "Gentlemen," Hunter began, his voice booming a little too loudly for the silent room. "Thank you for welcoming me to the team. I know that Nexara I has been struggling with profitability in the last 2 quarters, but I am not here to talk about small tweaks. I am here to talk about a revolution." He clicked to the next slide. It was a complex graph showing revenue growth skyrocketing. It looked impressive visually, but the data underneath was nonsensical. "I call this the unified market strategy," Hunter said, pointing a laser at the screen. "My analysis shows that we are competing too aggressively on price. We are bleeding margins trying to undercut our rivals. But what if we stopped fighting? What if we controlled the battlefield?" I listened as the room grew colder. The air conditioning was humming, but the chill coming from the 12 board members was entirely human. These were seasoned investors, lawyers, and tech giants. They knew exactly what they were looking at. Hunter clicked to the 3rd slide. This was the trap. This was the slide where he proposed the algorithm I had coded for him. The text was bold and undeniable: Project Harmony automating price alignment, with key competitors to eliminate market volatility. So Hunter continued, oblivious to the tension building like a thunderhead. "I have developed a proprietary code. I wrote this myself over the weekend, actually. It uses a handshake protocol to signal our pricing floor to our top 3 competitors' servers. Basically, it ensures that none of us drop below a certain profit margin. It guarantees revenue for everyone." He paused, waiting for applause. He expected them to be impressed by his genius. Instead, there was a silence so profound it felt heavy. A man sitting halfway down the table leaned forward. His name was Arthur Sterling, the general counsel for the board. He took off his reading glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose slowly. Mr. Brooks Sterling said, his voice quiet and deadly, "Are you aware of the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890? Hunter blinked. "The what?" "The Sherman Act," Sterling repeated. "It is a federal law that prohibits activities that restrict interstate commerce and competition in the marketplace. Specifically, it makes price fixing a felony punishable by up to 10 years in federal prison and fines of up to $100 million. Hunter laughed nervously. A short bark of a sound. "Well, sure. I know what price fixing is, but this is not that. This is algorithmic stabilization. It is high tech." Mr. Brooks Sterling cut him off, slamming his hand on the table. "You just stood in front of a board of directors and proposed that we create a digital cartel. You are suggesting that we use our software to conspire with competitors to artificially inflate prices. That is not high tech. That is a crime. If we implemented this, the Department of Justice would raid this building within a week." Hunter froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. He looked at the screen as if he had never seen the words before. I didn't," he stammered. "You said you wrote this code yourself." Sterling pressed, staring at him like a hawk. "You said this was your proprietary work. Is that true?" Hunter looked around the room. He saw 12 pairs of eyes looking at him with absolute contempt. He saw his signing bonus evaporating. He saw his reputation crumbling. Panic took over. It was ugly and swift. No, Hunter blurted out. "No, I didn't write it. Not the technical parts. I mean, I had the vision. I am the big picture guy. But the actual typing, the code, I didn't do that." "Then who did?" Sterling asked. "It was my assistant," Hunter said, desperate to find a scapegoat. "I have this temporary assistant. She is completely incompetent. I told her to research market trends and she must have copy-pasted some bad data from the internet. She is an idiot, honestly. I should have checked her work, but I was trying to give her a chance." He let out a shaky breath, thinking he had saved himself. "Yeah, that is it. My assistant messed up. I will fire her immediately." "I apologize, gentlemen. It is hard to find good help these days, especially when you are trying to do charity work for unskilled workers." He straightened his tie, regaining a shred of his arrogance. "Just disregard that slide. I will have the correct data sent over later. Now, if we can move on to my compensation package." "Excuse me." My voice cut through the air like a razor blade. It was soft, but it carried a weight that made the glass water bottles on the table vibrate. Hunter stopped. He looked at the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table, which was still turned away from him. Assistant Hunter asked, confused. "Is that what you call me now?" I asked. I slowly tapped the armrest of my chair. "Last night, I believe you referred to me as a donkey. You told your friends I was a moron. You said I was the ghetto lottery. And now I am your incompetent assistant." Hunter took a step back. He knew that voice, but his brain refused to accept the reality. It was a cognitive dissonance so strong it made him dizzy. "Amara," he whispered. I pressed the button on the armrest. The hydraulic motor hummed. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the chair began to turn. The movement felt like the rotation of a planet. Hunter stood there, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide and terrified. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing from the cookie jar, only to realize the jar was filled with scorpions. The chair completed its rotation. I sat there, legs crossed, hands folded calmly in my lap. I was not wearing the oversized hoodie he was used to. I was not wearing the stained sweatpants or the worn-out sneakers. I was wearing a white Armani suit that was tailored to within a millimeter of perfection. My hair was pulled back, revealing diamond earrings that caught the harsh fluorescent light of the boardroom. My makeup was flawless. I looked like money. I looked like power. I looked like his worst nightmare. Hunter stared at me. He blinked once, twice, 3 times. Amara, he said again, but this time it was a question. Hello, Hunter, I said. He looked around the room waiting for someone to laugh, waiting for someone to tell him this was a prank. What are you doing here? He asked, his voice rising in pitch. How did you get in here? Did you sneak past security? He looked at Sterling. Why is she sitting there? This is my fiancé's sister. She is unemployed. She is nobody. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Amara, get out of that chair. You are embarrassing me. Did you follow me here to beg for money again? I told you I would give you a job cleaning the break room, but you can't just barge into a board meeting. He turned to Earl, the man he had called a janitor earlier. Hey, you! Security! Get her out of here! She is trespassing. Earl did not move. He just smiled a slow, cold smile. Mr. Brooks, Earl said, I take my orders from the chairman of the board, and that is the woman you are pointing your finger at. Hunter froze. He looked at Earl. He looked at me. Chairman, he whispered. I stood up. I did not rush. I rose with the grace of a queen and the authority of an executioner. I picked up a thick leather folder from the table and tossed it. It slid across the polished obsidian surface, making a hissing sound before coming to a stop right in front of Hunter. Open it, I commanded. Hunter opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were the acquisition papers, the transfer of stock, the deed to the building, and at the bottom of every single page was a signature in bold, authoritative ink. Amara Jones, Managing Partner, Obsidian Capital. I don't understand, Hunter stammered, looking up at me. You are broke. You live in a studio apartment. You couldn't afford a salad on Saturday. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. I live in a studio apartment because I choose to, Hunter. I drive a 10-year-old Honda when I visit my mother, because I know she only values people for what she can take from them. I hide my wealth because money attracts parasites. I stared deep into his eyes. And you, Hunter, are the biggest parasite I have ever encountered. Hunter shook his head, backing away. No, this is a lie. This is fake. You are playing a trick on me. You are just Amara. You are the ugly sister. You are the failure. I am the owner of this company, I said, my voice rising. I am the one who bought your debt this morning. I am the one who owns the mortgage on the house you sleep in. And I am the one who just recorded you confessing to federal antitrust violations. I pointed to the door. You are fired, Hunter. Something inside him snapped. The reality was too much for his ego to handle. His face twisted into a mask of pure primal rage. He couldn't process the shift in power, so he resorted to violence. You bitch, he screamed. He lunged across the table. He scrambled over the mahogany, reaching for me. His hands curled into claws. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to silence the truth. You think you can play me? He roared, knocking over a pitcher of water. I will kill you. I did not flinch. I did not move. Before he could get within 5 feet of me, 2 large shadows detached themselves from the wall. Earl and another security guard moved with terrifying speed. Earl grabbed Hunter by the back of his expensive jacket and yanked him backward. Hunter flew off the table, crashing onto the floor with a sickening thud. Get off me, he screamed, kicking and thrashing. Do you know who I am? You are a trespasser, Earl said, pinning Hunter's arm behind his back. I walked around the table slowly. I stood over him, looking down at his face pressed against the carpet. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with hate and tears. Amara, please, he gasped, the fight suddenly leaving him as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Amara, I am sorry. I didn't mean it. We are family. I looked down at him. Family, I repeated. I leaned down close enough so only he could hear me. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't call each other a ghetto lottery. And family definitely doesn't sign their sister's name to a fraudulent loan. I stood up and turned to Earl. Get him out of my sight. And Earl, make sure the police are waiting in the lobby. I want him walked out through the front door in cuffs. I want everyone to see. Hunter began to sob as they hauled him to his feet. He was dragging his feet like a child who didn't want to go to school. "Amara, call Shanice," he begged. "Tell her to help me." I smiled. A cold, sharp smile. "Oh, don't worry, Hunter. I am going to call Shanice. We are going to have a very long conversation." As the doors closed behind his screaming figure, I turned back to the board of directors. They were silent, watching me with a mixture of fear and respect. I adjusted my jacket. "Gentlemen," I said, sitting back down in my chair. "I apologize for the interruption. Now let's talk about the real future of this company." Hunter sat in the chair I had forced him into, his hands trembling as he rubbed his wrists. He looked at the board members, trying to find a sympathetic face, but he found only stone walls. He decided to play his last card, the victim card. "You are all making a mistake," Hunter pleaded, his voice cracking with fake emotion. "Amara is vindictive. She is jealous of my success. She hacked my computer. She doctored those files. I am an honest man. I love this company, and I love her sister. This is a family dispute that has gotten out of hand." I stood at the head of the table. I did not shout. I simply pressed a button on the remote control. The massive screen behind me changed. It was no longer showing the illegal algorithm. It was now showing a video file. It was the footage from the night before, the footage from the vault. The audio filled the room, crystal clear and devastating. "They are the ghetto lottery," Hunter's voice boomed from the speakers, accompanied by the clinking of expensive Scotch glasses. "They see a white guy in a suit and they think they won the jackpot. I am going to rob them blind and vanish." Hunter watched the screen, his face turning the color of old ash. He watched himself laugh. He watched himself mock Shanice. He watched himself brag about the exit strategy. I paused the video right on the frame where he raised his glass in a toast to his own greed. I looked at the board members. Arthur Sterling looked like he wanted to be sick. The other investors looked at Hunter with pure, unadulterated disgust. It was not just the fraud. It was the racism. It was the betrayal. "That is your honest man," I said, my voice slicing through the silence. "That is the man who claims to love my sister." Hunter shook his head. "That was taken out of context. I was drunk. It was locker room talk." I ignored him. I clicked the remote again. A bank statement appeared on the screen. "And this," I continued, "is the bank account for the venue of your upcoming wedding. The plot of land at the Botanical Gardens that Shanice believes is booked and paid for." I pointed the laser at the balance. $0. "Shanice gave you a deposit of $15,000 3 months ago," I said. "My mother gave you another $10,000 for the catering. Where is that money, Hunter?" Hunter swallowed hard. "It is invested. I told you. It is in a high-yield account." I clicked the remote one more time. An image of a receipt appeared. It was from a luxury car dealership. It was a lease down payment for the Mercedes he was currently driving, and a second receipt for a diamond necklace from Cartier. "You spent my sister's wedding money on a car for yourself," I said. "And the necklace. I know for a fact Shanice did not receive a Cartier necklace. Who is that for, Hunter?" Hunter stayed silent. He was drowning, and there was no life raft. "But we are not here to talk about your personal moral failures," I said, closing the folder. "We are here to talk about federal law." I looked toward the back of the room. The double doors opened again. This time it was not a janitor. 4 men walked in wearing windbreakers with bold yellow letters on the back. FBI. Hunter scrambled backward in his chair, knocking it over. "What is this?" he screamed. "You called the feds." "Amara Jones called us Mr. Brooks," the lead agent said, walking forward with a pair of steel handcuffs. "We have been tracking a series of fraudulent loan applications originating from your IP address. Yesterday you initiated a wire transfer of $20,000 from a flagged corporate account to a known illegal gambling syndicate. That is money laundering and wire fraud." Hunter looked at me. His eyes were wide with betrayal, as if I was the one who had committed the crime. "You set me up," he hissed. "You gave me that money. You told me it was safe." I gave you exactly what you asked for, I said coldly. You asked for my life savings. I gave you a rope. You chose to hang yourself with it. The agents pulled Hunter to his feet. He fought them. He was not a strong man, but he was fueled by the adrenaline of a narcissist losing his supply. Get your hands off me, he shouted. Do you know who I am? I am a vice president. You are a liability, Arthur Sterling corrected from the table. And as of 10 minutes ago, you are trespassed from this property. They dragged him toward the door. The reality of prison began to sink in. The reality of the 10-year sentence, the reality of the fines. He realized he had no money. He realized he had no lawyer. He realized his only asset was the blind loyalty of the women he had planned to abandon. Amara! Wait! He screamed, thrashing against the agents. Amara, call Shanice. Tell her to sell the house. I stared at him impassively. Tell her to sell the house. He howled, his voice echoing down the corridor. She has equity. She can bail me out. Tell Joyce to mortgage the property. I need a lawyer. Don't let them take me. The doors slammed shut, cutting off his desperate pleas. The boardroom fell silent. I looked at the empty chair where he had sat. I looked at the coffee stain on the carpet from his struggle. I turned to the board. I apologize for the theatricality, gentlemen, I said, smoothing my blazer. But sometimes you have to cut out the cancer before you can heal the body. I picked up my phone. It was time for the final act. The Buckhead Spa and Wellness Center was an oasis of calm. It smelled of eucalyptus and cucumber water. Soft flute music played in the background, designed to lull wealthy women into a state of pliable relaxation. My mother and Shanice were currently sitting in the VIP lounge, wearing plush white robes with cucumber slices over their eyes. They were waiting for my call. They were waiting to hear that Hunter had been made a king so they could officially crown themselves queens. I walked out of the boardroom and down the hall to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the street. I could see the police cruisers flashing their lights below. I could see the FBI agents shoving a handcuffed Hunter into the back of an SUV. I initiated a FaceTime call to Shanice. It rang once, twice. Then Shanice's face appeared on the screen. She pulled the cucumber slices off, her eyes beaming. Her skin was glowing from a facial I had paid for indirectly. Amara? She squealed. Did he get it? Is he the VP? Tell me everything. We have the champagne ready to pop. My mother's face appeared next to hers. She looked smug. Did he mention the signing bonus? Joyce asked. I found a lovely vacation home in Florida we can put a down payment on. I looked at them. I looked at the hope in their eyes. It was a fragile, toxic hope built on the back of a lie. I am at the office right now, I said, my voice flat. You are at Nixara? Shanice asked. Oh my God, did Hunter give you the cleaning job already? That is so sweet of him. I flipped the camera. I pointed my phone down at the street below. I zoomed in. The image on their screen was clear. It was Hunter. He was disheveled, his tie undone, his head bowed, as an agent pushed him into the back of the federal vehicle. What am I looking at? Shanice asked, her voice trembling. Is that Hunter? That is your fiancé, I said, flipping the camera back to my face. He is currently being arrested for federal wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. My mother gasped. That is impossible. He is an executive. This is a mistake. It is not a mistake, I said. I just fired him. You fired him, Shanice screamed. Who do you think you are? You are nobody. I am the owner of Nexara I said, letting the words land like stones. I bought the controlling interest this morning, and my first act of business was to hand over the evidence of his crimes to the FBI. Shanice dropped her phone. She scrambled to pick it up. Her face was pale. Why would you do this? She sobbed. He loved me. He was going to take care of us. He was going to leave you, I said. I played the audio clip from the bachelor party again, right into the phone. They heard his voice clear as day. Ghetto lottery. Rob them blind. Ghost. Shanice froze. The color left her lips. And Mom. I continued looking at my mother's horrified face. You want to know about your investment? The $50,000 you bullied me into giving him. My mother nodded, mute with shock. He didn't use it to pay off a loan shark, I said. He used it to pay the rent for a luxury condo in Midtown. For us? Joyce asked, hope flickering in her eyes. No, I said, delivering the final blow. For his mistress. Her name is Tiffany, she is 22 years old, and that Cartier necklace he bought with Shanice's wedding deposit, that is currently around her neck. There was a moment of absolute silence on the line. Then Shanice made a sound like a wounded animal. Her eyes rolled back in her head. She collapsed sideways, sliding off the massage chair onto the tiled floor of the spa. Shanice, my mother screamed, dropping the phone. I watched the camera feed spin as the phone hit the ground. I could hear the spa staff rushing in. I could hear my mother screaming for help, screaming that her daughter wasn't breathing. I could have hung up, but I watched for a few more seconds. I watched the chaos I had unleashed. It was cruel, yes, but it was the truth. And the truth is a violent thing when you have lived in a lie for so long. I ended the call. I looked down at the street. The police car was pulling away, its siren wailing a mournful song. Hunter was gone. The illusion was shattered. I turned around and walked back toward the boardroom. My heels clicked on the marble floor, a steady rhythmic sound of victory. I had a company to run, and for the first time in my life I didn't have a family to hold me back. The fallout was immediate, and it was catastrophic. I sat in my corner office at the top of the obsidian tower, watching the live security feed from my mother's front porch. I had installed those cameras years ago to keep them safe, but now they served a different purpose. They were the lens through which I watched the dismantling of their false reality. 2 hours after Hunter was dragged away in handcuffs, a dark sedan pulled up to my mother's driveway, followed closely by a moving truck and a law enforcement vehicle. My mother and Shanice had just returned from the spa, still wearing their frantic expressions, their hair disheveled from the panic of the morning. They were rushing inside, presumably to pack bags or find hidden cash, but they were stopped at the door by a uniformed sheriff deputy. I turned up the volume on my monitor. "Ma'am, you cannot enter the premises," the deputy said, blocking the mahogany front door with his arm. "This property has been seized by the bank." My mother, Joyce, let out a shriek that sounded like metal grinding on glass. "Seized? What are you talking about? This is my house. I have lived here for 20 years. Get out of my way." She tried to push past him, but the deputy did not budge. He held up a clipboard with a thick stack of legal documents. "Mrs. Jones, the deed to this house was used as collateral for a commercial business loan 3 weeks ago. The loan is in default due to immediate fraud triggers. The bank has exercised its right to immediate foreclosure. The locks have already been changed." My mother froze. She stared at the paper. "Collateral," she whispered. "No. Hunter said he just needed a character reference. He said I was just co-signing for his character." The deputy shook his head. "You signed a deed of trust, ma'am. You gave him the house. And since the funds were used for criminal activity, the asset is frozen. You have 10 minutes to retrieve essential medication. Everything else stays." Shanice collapsed onto the front lawn. She was wailing loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. And the neighbors were listening. I could see the curtains twitching in the houses across the street. The Homeowners Association president, a woman my mother had spent years trying to impress, was standing on her porch with her arms crossed, shaking her head. The humiliation was public, it was loud, and it was entirely self-inflicted. I watched as my mother tried to bargain. She offered the deputy money she did not have. She threatened to call the mayor. She invoked the name of Jesus. But the law is cold mathematics. You signed the paper. You lost the house. They emerged 10 minutes later, clutching armfuls of clothes and prescription bottles. The moving crew began boarding up the windows. "Where are we going to go?" Shanice sobbed, clutching her designer purse, which I knew was fake. "Hunter has the car keys. My apartment is in his name. We have nothing." My mother looked around wildly, her eyes darting like a trapped animal. Then her gaze hardened. She looked toward the city skyline, toward the black monolith of the obsidian tower rising in the distance. "We are going to Amara," she said. "She did this. She has money now. She is the chairman. She owes us." I leaned back in my chair and took a sip of water. They still didn't get it. They still thought I was a resource to be tapped. They thought my success belonged to them simply because we shared a bloodline. I watched them call an Uber because their cars had been towed. I watched them drive away. 30 minutes later, my office intercom buzzed. It was Earl. "Ms. Jones," he said, his voice calm and professional. "You have visitors in the lobby. They are causing a disturbance." "Let them up," I asked. "No," Earl said. "I think you should see this on the lobby feed first." I switched my monitor to the lobby camera. My mother and Shanice were standing at the security turnstiles screaming at the receptionist. Shanice was wearing sweatpants and a silk blouse that was buttoned wrong. My mother looked like a specter of rage. "Call her down here," my mother screamed, slamming her hand on the desk. "Tell her Joyce is here. Tell her I am her mother, and I command her to come down here and fix this mess." The receptionist looked terrified. But then a large shadow moved across the screen. It was Earl. He was no longer wearing the tuxedo from the boardroom. He was back in his impeccably tailored head of security suit. He stepped between my mother and the turnstiles. "Mrs. Jones," Earl said, his voice deep and rumbling. "You need to lower your voice. This is a place of business." My mother looked up at him. She recognized him. He was the janitor Hunter had insulted, the man she had walked past 1,000 times in her imagination without ever seeing. "You," she spat. "You are the janitor. Get out of my way. Go mop something. I need to see the owner." Earl smiled. It was not a kind smile. "I am the head of security for Obsidian Capital, madam, and I am also a minority shareholder. And the owner, Ms. Jones, has given strict instructions." "What instructions?" Shanice demanded, pushing forward. "We are her family. She loves us. This is just a misunderstanding. Tell her we are sorry about Hunter. Tell her we forgive her for calling the police. Just tell her to cut us a check so we can get a hotel." Earl shook his head slowly. The audacity of these women was truly a marvel of human psychology. They were standing in the wreckage of their own greed, offering me forgiveness. "Ms. Jones does not have any family," Earl said. My mother stopped. "What did you say?" Earl looked directly into the camera, knowing I was watching. "Ms. Jones told me that her family died a long time ago. She said she is an orphan. The people standing in front of me are just strangers who share her last name, and strangers are not allowed past the security checkpoint without an appointment." "You are lying!" my mother shrieked. "Amara, I know you can hear me. Get down here, you ungrateful child. I gave you life." Earl stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You gave her life," Earl said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And then you spent 30 years trying to drain it out of her. You took her confidence. You took her money. You took her dignity. And you gave it all to a man who called you a lottery ticket." He pointed to the revolving doors. "The bank owns your house. The state owns your fiancé. And Amara owns this building. You have no currency here. Leave before I have you removed for trespassing." Shanice looked at the elevator banks. She looked up toward the ceiling as if she could see through the 40 floors of concrete and steel to where I sat. "Amara," she wailed. "Please, I have nowhere to go. I am pregnant." I paused. My hand hovered over the intercom button. Pregnant. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. My forensic team had accessed her medical records as part of the background check on Hunter. Shanice had been on birth control for 5 years. She was using the oldest trick in the book. She was weaponizing an imaginary child to gain entry. I pressed the intercom button connecting me to the speakers in the lobby. My voice filled the cavernous space echoing off the marble walls. "You are not pregnant, Shanice," I said. They both jumped, looking around wildly for the source of my voice. "Amara," my mother cried, looking at a security camera. "Amara, baby, please. Open the gate." I looked at the receipts from the pharmacy on my second monitor. "You refilled your prescription yesterday, Shanice," I said, my voice cold and metallic. "Do not lie to me. Not anymore. I see everything." "Amara, please," Shanice begged, falling to her knees on the cold floor. "We are sorry. We were stupid. Just help us this one last time. We will do anything. I will clean the floors. Mom will cook. Just don't leave us on the street." I stood up from my desk and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. I looked down. From 40 floors up, the cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. I could not see my mother and sister, but I knew they were down there. I knew they were crying. But were they crying because they loved me? Or were they crying because the host had finally cut off the parasite? "Earl," I said into the intercom. "Yes, Ms. Jones. Escort them out. If they resist, call the police. I believe my mother has an outstanding warrant for unpaid property taxes that was triggered when the house was seized." "No," my mother screamed. "No, Amara." I cut the audio feed. I watched on the video monitor as Earl and two other guards gently but firmly lifted Shanice to her feet. They took my mother by the elbows. They marched them toward the revolving doors. My mother kicked and screamed. She looked like a child having a tantrum. The woman who had terrorized me with her silence and her disapproval for 3 decades was now being dragged out of my building like a common nuisance. They were pushed out onto the sidewalk. The doors spun shut behind them, sealing the air-conditioned quiet of my world from the humid, chaotic reality of theirs. I stood by the window for a long time. I watched them standing on the curb. They looked small. They looked lost. They were arguing with each other now, pointing fingers, blaming each other for the disaster. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Earl. "Building is secure, Ms. Jones. Do you need anything else?" I looked at the empty boardroom behind me. It was quiet. It was peaceful. For the first time in my life, the noise in my head, the constant voice telling me I wasn't good enough, wasn't pretty enough, wasn't smart enough, had finally stopped. "No, Earl," I typed back. "I have everything I need." I turned away from the window, leaving them on the street. I had a company to run, and for the first time the view from the top didn't look lonely. It looked like freedom. The following week passed in a blur of high-stakes negotiations and the quiet satisfaction of total control. While my former family was discovering the harsh reality of consequences, I was sitting in the boardroom of Obsidian Capital, finalizing the merger that would turn Nexara AI into the largest tech conglomerate in the Southeast. The air in my office smelled of fresh espresso and expensive leather. It was the scent of victory. But my phone kept buzzing. It vibrated against the mahogany desk like a trapped insect. I did not need to look at the screen to know who it was. The block feature on my phone was working for calls, but I had left the text messages open. I wanted a record. I wanted to see the progression of their grief. I picked up the phone and scrolled through the deluge of messages from my mother, Joyce. "Amara, please pick up. We are staying in a motel on Old National Highway. It is dangerous here. There are drug dealers in the parking lot. Shanice is scared. Amara, how can you sleep at night knowing your mother is sleeping on dirty sheets? I raised you better than this. God does not like ugly, Amara. Honor thy mother and father. We are hungry. The motel has a microwave, but we have no food. Send us $500. Just 500. That is nothing to you." I read the words with a clinical detachment. A week ago, these messages would have sent me into a spiral of guilt. I would have rushed to rescue them. I would have apologized for their bad decisions. But the Amara who did that was dead. She had died the moment they tried to steal my future to pay for their vanity. I set the phone down and looked at the contract in front of me. The CEO of the rival firm was sitting across the table looking nervous. "Ms. Jones," he said, clearing his throat, "regarding the severance packages for the redundant executives, Do you want to be generous or standard? I looked at him. I thought about the text messages. Standard, I said. Actually, make it bare minimum. We are running a business, not a charity. He nodded, scribbling a note. You are tough, Miss Jones. I smiled. You have no idea. Meanwhile, across the city, in a room that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation, my mother and Shanice were sitting on a lumpy mattress. I knew the location. The Starlight Motel. It was the kind of place where you paid by the hour and the police visited twice a night. Shanice was curled up in a ball wearing the same sweatpants she had been evicted in. Her hair was unwashed, her fake nails had started to pop off one by one, leaving jagged glue marks. Mom, call her again. Shanice whined. Tell her I am sick. Tell her I think I have pneumonia. She has to help if I am sick. Joyce paced the small room, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor that was peeling at the corners. She looked haggard. The stress had aged her 10 years in 7 days. I have texted her 20 times, Joyce snapped. She is reading them. I can see the read receipt. She is ignoring us on purpose. She is punishing us. She is evil, Shanice sobbed. She is enjoying this. How can she treat her own flesh and blood like this? Hunter was right. She is a monster. Don't speak his name, Joyce hissed. That man is the reason we are here. If I ever see him again, I will kill him myself. They were interrupted by a sharp, authoritative knock on the door. 3 distinct raps. Joyce froze. Her eyes lit up with sudden, desperate hope. It is her, she whispered. It is Amara. I knew she would come. She couldn't leave us here. She just wanted to teach us a lesson. Shanice sat up, wiping her eyes. Fix my hair, Mom. Do I look pathetic enough? If I look sad, she will give us more money. Joyce rushed to the door. She unlocked the deadbolt, and the chain swinging the door open with a dramatic flourish, prepared to launch into a speech about forgiveness and family duty. Amara, baby, thank go. She stopped. It was not me standing in the doorway. Standing in the dim light of the motel walkway was a tall man in a charcoal gray suit. He held a briefcase and wore wire-rimmed glasses. He looked out of place among the peeling paint and the flickering neon lights. Mrs. Joyce Jones, the man asked. Joyce blinked, confused. Who are you? Where is Amara? The man stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation. The air conditioning unit rattled loudly as he closed the door behind him. My name is Mr. Henderson. I am the lead counsel for Obsidian Capital. I represent Miss Amara Jones. Shanice scrambled off the bed. You are her lawyer. Is she in the car? Is she coming to get us? Mr. Henderson looked around the room. His nose wrinkled slightly at the smell of mildew, but his expression remained impassive. He set his briefcase on the small, wobbly table and snapped the latches open. Ms. Jones will not be coming, he said. In fact, Ms. Jones has no intention of ever seeing or speaking to either of you again. Joyce grasped her chest. What? That is ridiculous. She is my daughter. You can't separate a mother and daughter with a lawyer. Mr. Henderson ignored the histrionics. He pulled out 2 thick documents and placed them on the table next to a heavy gold pen. Ms. Jones is aware of your current living situation. She is aware that you have no assets, no credit, and no income. She is also aware that you have been contacting the press trying to sell a story about how the evil billionaire daughter abandoned her poor family. Joyce went pale. How did she know that? We know everything, Mrs. Jones, Henderson said. We know you called the Atlanta Journal-Constitution yesterday. We know you tried to contact a tabloid in New York this morning. Fortunately for you, no one bought the story because Ms. Jones controls the narrative in this town, but she wants the nuisance to stop. He tapped the documents. This is a proposal. A solution to your problem. Shanice crept closer, looking at the papers. What is it? Is it money? Mr. Henderson nodded. It is a conditionally revocable trust. Mrs. Jones has purchased a small 2-bedroom condo in the suburbs. It is fully furnished. The utilities are paid. In addition, there is a monthly stipend of $2,000 for living expenses. Joyce let out a sob of relief. Oh, thank Jesus. I knew it. I knew she loved us. 2 bedrooms. Is it nice? Is it near the mall? Mr. Henderson held up a hand. There are conditions, Mrs. Jones. Strict binding legal conditions. This is not a gift. It is a contract. He opened the document to the last page. This is a non-disclosure agreement and a permanent no-contact order. By signing this, you agree to never speak to the press about Amara Jones. You agree to never approach her place of business or her residence. You agree to never mention her name on social media. You agree to never contact her by phone, text, email, or carrier pigeon. He looked at them, his eyes cold behind the glass lenses. To the world, Amara Jones has no family. You are strangers. If you sign, you get the condo and the stipend. If you violate even one clause of this agreement, if you send one text, if you make one Facebook post, the trust is dissolved immediately. You will be evicted within 24 hours and you will be sued for defamation and damages. Shanice looked at the paper. You want us to pretend she doesn't exist? Mr. Henderson smiled thin and sharp. Miss Jones is paying you to disappear. She is buying your silence, not your affection. Joyce stared at the lawyer. The reality of the transaction was sinking in. This wasn't an act of love, it was a business deal. I was treating them exactly how they had treated me for years. I was determining their value and paying the market rate to keep them quiet. But we are her family, Joyce whispered, tears streaming down her face. Doesn't she want to see us? Doesn't she want me to be at her wedding one day? To see her children? Mr. Henderson closed his briefcase with a snap. Miss Jones wanted me to convey a message regarding that. She said you already made your choice about family when you signed a fraudulent loan to protect a man who called you a lottery ticket. She said she is simply finalizing the transaction. He checked his watch. You have 10 minutes to decide. Sign the papers and the car outside will take you to the condo. Refuse and I leave. And if I leave, I can assure you that the eviction from this motel will happen by tomorrow morning, because the owner of this establishment is also a client of ours. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator. Joyce looked at Shanice. Shanice looked at the dirty walls, the stained carpet, the hopelessness of their situation. They had no pride left. They had no leverage. They were drowning, and I was the only one with a boat. Give me the pen, Shanice said, her voice breaking. Shanice! No, Joyce gasped. We can't sell her out. We aren't selling her out. Mom, Shanice snapped, grabbing the pen. She bought us out. It is over. She won. Shanice signed the paper. She pressed down so hard the paper tore slightly. She pushed the document toward her mother. Sign it, Mom. Or we sleep on the street tonight. Joyce looked at the document. She looked at the door, hoping for a miracle that wasn't coming. Finally, with a trembling hand, she took the pen. She signed her name. It was done. Back in my office, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from Mr. Henderson. The agreement is signed. The assets are secured. They are no longer your problem. I stared at the message. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. The heavy anchor of obligation that had dragged behind me for 32 years had finally been cut loose. I deleted the text thread. I deleted their numbers. I turned off my phone. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting, painting the Atlanta skyline in shades of gold and violet. I looked down at the city, my city. Ms. Jones, the CEO, asked behind me, "Are you ready to sign the merger?" I turned around. I picked up my pen. It was a Mont Blanc, heavy and substantial. Yes, I said. I am ready. I signed my name on the merger contract, Amara Jones. The name meant something now. It stood for something, and for the first time in my life, it stood alone. The black town car that transported my mother and sister from the squalor of the Starlight Motel to their new residence moved with the smooth, silent efficiency of a hearse. I was not in the car with them, but I tracked its GPS progress from my office monitor. I watched the little blue dot move away from the dangerous side of town and head toward the suburbs. But the car did not head toward the exclusive gated community of Buckhead, where they had lived for 20 years. It did not turn toward the sprawling estates with swimming pools and tennis courts. Instead, it turned into a development called Oakwood Commons. It was a respectable neighborhood. It was clean. It was safe. But it was decidedly middle class. The houses were townhomes connected in rows with small patches of lawn and shared driveways. It was the kind of place where teachers and nurses lived. It was the kind of place my mother had spent her entire life looking down on. I switched the camera feed to the interior of the car. My mother was pressing her face against the tinted glass, her eyes wide with confusion. "Where are we going?" Joyce asked the driver. "You missed the turn for the country club district." The driver did not answer. The glass partition was up. Mr. Henderson, the lawyer, sat opposite them in the back seat. He adjusted his glasses and opened a new file folder. "We are arriving at your new residence, Mrs. Jones," he said calmly. "It is a 2-bedroom townhome, 1,200 square feet, functional and fully furnished." 1,200 square feet. Shanice gasped. Her voice was shrill. "Our old living room was bigger than that. How are we supposed to live in a shoebox, Mr.?" Henderson looked at her with the cold indifference of a reptile. "You were living in a 300-square-foot motel room 10 minutes ago, Ms. Jones. I suggest you adjust your perspective." The car pulled up to Unit 4B. It was a beige building with white trim. Perfectly adequate, perfectly average. To me, it looked like charity. To them, it looked like a prison sentence. They got out of the car. My mother looked at the small porch and the plastic potted plant by the door. She looked ready to vomit. Mr. Henderson unlocked the door and ushered them inside. The interior was clean. The furniture was from IKEA. It was practical. There were no crystal chandeliers. There were no velvet sofas. There was beige carpet and sturdy particle board tables. "Sit down," Mr. Henderson commanded, pointing to the gray fabric sofa. They sat clutching their purses like life rafts. Mr. Henderson stood in the center of the small living room. He held the keys in his hand, but he did not hand them over. "Before I give you possession of this property, we need to review the lease addendum," he said. "This is a document Amara drafted herself. It outlines the code of conduct required to maintain your tenancy." "Code of conduct," Joyce scoffed. "In my own house." Mr. Henderson corrected her immediately. "It is not your house, Mrs. Jones. This property is owned by a holding company under Obsidian Capital. You are tenants at will, and your landlord is your daughter." He opened the document and began to read. "Rule number 1. No unauthorized guests. This includes specifically Mr. Hunter Brooks. If that man is seen within 500 feet of this property, the lease is voided immediately and you will be evicted." Shanice started to cry. "But I love him. He needs me." Mr. Henderson ignored her. "Rule number 2. Mandatory employment." He looked at Shanice. "Ms. Jones, Amara has noted that you have a degree in pharmacy technology that you have never used because you preferred to be a socialite. You have 30 days to secure gainful employment. You will submit pay stubs to my office on the 1st of every month." "Work!" Shanice shrieked. "I can't work. I have anxiety. I have status. People will laugh at me." Mr. Henderson continued, his voice relentless. "If you do not secure employment, the monthly stipend will be suspended. Amara is willing to subsidize your life, but she refuses to finance your laziness. You work or you starve." He turned to my mother. "Rule number 3. Financial transparency. You are no longer permitted to open lines of credit. Your credit reports are frozen and monitored. Any attempt to take out a loan or sign a lease will be flagged as a breach of contract." My mother's face turned red. "She is treating us like children." Mr. Henderson looked over his spectacles. You acted like children, Mrs. Jones. You gave away your security to a con artist. You proved you are incapable of managing your own affairs. So now Amara is managing them for you. He flipped to the final page. And finally, rule number 4, the humility clause. What is that? Joyce whispered. Mr. Henderson pointed to the walls. No parties, no entertaining, no bragging to the neighbors about money you do not have. Random inspections will occur quarterly to ensure the property is being maintained. If we find damage or evidence of lavish spending beyond your means, you will be removed. He placed the keys on the cheap coffee table. This is your reality now. You have a roof over your heads. You have food in the fridge. You have a safe place to sleep. That is more than you had this morning. It is certainly more than you deserve. He snapped his briefcase shut and walked to the door. My advice, he said, pausing with his hand on the knob. Don't test her. The Amara you knew is gone. The woman who owns this house does not make idle threats. He closed the door, leaving them in the silence of the beige living room. Back in my office, I watched the security feed from the camera hidden in the smoke detector. My mother stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the modest street. She did this to humiliate us, Joyce said, her voice shaking with rage. She put us in a poor person's house to teach us a lesson. Shanice was lying on the sofa, kicking her heels like a toddler. I hate this furniture, she wailed. It scratches my skin. And I have to get a job. I have to work at a pharmacy standing on my feet all day. I watched them, and I felt a strange sense of peace. For years, they had dictated the terms of my existence. They had told me where to sit, what to wear, how to speak. They had made me feel small, so they could feel big. Now the roles were reversed. I was the architect of their world. I had built a cage that looked like a home. It was a gilded cage, but the bars were made of their own incompetence. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Henderson. Did they sign the addendum? I asked. Yes, Miss Jones, he answered from the car. It is done. Good, I said. One more thing. Cancel the cable package. Excuse me, Ms. Jones, Henderson asked. Cancel the premium cable, I repeated. Leave them with basic channels. If Shanice is going to be working full-time, she won't have time to watch reality TV. And my mother needs to spend less time watching shopping networks and more time reflecting on her choices. Understood, Ms. Jones? I hung up. I looked at the screen one last time. Shanice was already on her phone, probably complaining to a friend who no longer cared. My mother was inspecting the refrigerator, looking for something to criticize. They were safe. They were housed. But they were no longer free. They were employees of my life, subject to my performance reviews. I turned off the monitor. The screen went black, erasing them from my sight. I had a meeting with the acquisitions team in 5 minutes. We were looking at buying a chain of luxury hotels in Europe. I needed to focus on the future. My past was safely locked away in Unit 4B Oakwood Commons, and for the first time in 32 years, I held the only key. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the driveway of the house on Mockingbird Lane. It was a beautiful house, a colonial facade that projected stability and wealth to the neighbors who drove by, but I knew the rot that lived inside the walls. I parked my car and walked toward the front door, which had been left ajar by the movers. The bank had given me a 1-hour window to retrieve personal effects before the final seal was placed on the property. I was not here for the furniture. I was not here for the jewelry. I was here for a single cardboard box stored in the back of the study. My father's vintage jazz records. They were the only things in this house that had ever made me feel safe. They were the soundtrack to the only love I had ever known in this building. Before he passed away, I walked into the foyer. The house echoed. It smelled of dust and cardboard, and the sour scent of failure. The spot where my sister used to pose for prom photos was empty. The dining table where I was told to eat in the kitchen when guests came over was gone. I walked into the study, and I stopped. My mother was there. Joyce was standing in the center of the empty room. She was wearing her coat, clutching her purse, looking at the bare bookshelves. She looked smaller than I remembered. The towering figure of my childhood had shrunk into a bitter, fragile woman. She turned when she heard my footsteps. Her eyes were red. "You came to gloat," she said. Her voice was thin, brittle. "You came to see the ruins of the empire you destroyed." I walked past her and picked up the box of records. It was heavy. "I came for my father," I said. "The rest of this is just wood and plaster. You can have the memories, Joyce. I only want the music." She stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door. For a moment, I saw the flash of the old Joyce, the woman who used to terrify me with a single look. "Why are you so cruel, Amara?" she asked. The question hung in the air. "How can you do this to your own blood?" "We are in a townhouse, Amara. A townhouse with shared walls. I can hear the neighbor's television. How could you be so cold? Where did you learn to be this heartless?" I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had convinced me I was unlovable for 32 years. I shifted the box to my hip. "I am not cruel, Mom," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Cruelty is raising a child to feel like an accessory. Cruelty is selling your daughter's trust for a con artist's promise. Cruelty is watching me struggle for years and telling me I deserved it." I stepped closer to her. "I didn't learn this coldness from strangers," I said. "I learned it from you. I am simply acting like a mirror. I am reflecting back to you exactly what you gave to me. You gave me transaction. You gave me conditions. You gave me silence when I needed help. So I am paying you back in the same currency. You wanted a business arrangement. You have one. But I am your mother," she whispered, tears leaking from her eyes. "And I was your daughter," I said. Past tense. I walked around her. She did not try to stop me again. She stood there in the center of the empty room, a queen without a kingdom, abandoned by the subjects she had mistreated. I walked out of the study. I walked through the foyer. I stepped out onto the front porch. The air outside was crisp. I walked down the steps past the foreclosure sign that was being hammered into the lawn. I put the box of records in the passenger seat of my car. I stood there for a moment, looking back at the house. I expected to feel sad. I expected to feel guilt. But as I watched the movers close the heavy front door, locking my mother and the ghosts inside, I felt a physical sensation in my chest. It was a release. It was the feeling of a heavy winter coat being taken off on the first warm day of spring. The weight that had been crushing my lungs since I was a little girl was gone. I got into my car. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the house, the trauma, and the woman named Joyce behind me. I was light. I was free. And the road ahead was wide open. 6 months had passed since the day I walked out of the empty house on Mockingbird Lane. The seasons had changed, turning the sweltering heat of the Atlanta summer into the crisp, golden embrace of autumn. Tonight, the air outside the St. Regis Hotel was cool, but inside the grand ballroom, it was warm and alive with the hum of success. I stood on the balcony overlooking the gala. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, casting a kaleidoscope of light across the scene. This was the annual Southeast Business Innovators Awards. Last year, I hadn't even been able to get a ticket. Tonight, I was the keynote speaker. I looked down at my dress. It was emerald green velvet, a deep, rich color that commanded attention without screaming for it. It was cut to perfection, draping over my body like liquid courage. I wore no jewelry except for a simple pair of diamond studs. I didn't need to sparkle. I was the light. Ms. Jones. I turned around. Standing there was a man holding 2 glasses of champagne. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his tuxedo effortlessly. His skin was the color of rich mahogany, and his eyes were warm, intelligent, and devoid of the hunger I was used to seeing in men like Hunter. "I believe this is yours," he said, handing me a glass. "And congratulations on your speech." It was quite stirring, especially the part about ethical leadership in the age of automation. I took the glass. "Thank you. I don't believe we have met." He smiled, and it reached his eyes. My name is Julian Thorne. I run the venture capital firm that just partnered with you on the European hotel acquisition. I have been admiring your work from afar for a long time, Amara. You have a reputation for being formidable. I took a sip of champagne watching him over the rim of the glass. Formidable was a polite word for ruthless. It was a word men used for women who didn't apologize for winning. Is that a bad thing, I asked? Julian laughed. A deep, genuine sound. On the contrary, in this city it is a survival skill. I grew up in a household where I was told to be seen and not heard. It took me 30 years to learn how to roar. It seems you learned it a bit faster. I looked out at the skyline. I didn't learn it fast, Julian. I learned it the hard way. I had to burn down a lot of bridges to build the one I am standing on. He moved to stand beside me, leaning against the railing. He didn't encroach on my space, he simply shared it, simply shared. Fire cleanses, he said softly. It makes way for new growth. I heard about what happened with Nexara. What you did wasn't just business, Amara. It was justice. And justice is rarely pretty, but it is always necessary. I looked at him surprised. Most people were terrified of the story. They whispered that I was cold, that I had destroyed my own family. Julian spoke of it like it was a victory. You know, I said, turning to face him. My mother used to tell me that a woman's greatest asset was her ability to compromise, to keep the peace. For years I thought she was protecting me. Now I realize she was just training me to be a doormat. Julian nodded. And now I realize that peace isn't something you keep by being quiet. It is something you make by setting boundaries. The music inside the ballroom swelled. A jazz band was playing a slow, soulful tune. It sounded like the records my father used to play. Would you like to dance, Ms. Jones? Julian asked, offering his hand. No business. No. No pitch. Just a dance. I looked at his hand. It was steady. For a split second I thought about Hunter. I thought about the way he used to grab my hand with a possessive grip, pulling me into his orbit. I thought about Shanice clinging to fake status. I thought about my mother alone in her beige townhouse watching basic cable. Then I looked at Julian. I saw a man who was my equal. A man who didn't need my light to shine because he had his own. I would love to, I said. I placed my hand in his. It felt warm. It felt right. As we walked back into the ballroom, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't just the champagne or the music or the handsome man by my side. It was a profound sense of arrival. For so long I had been chasing a definition of family that was flawed from the start. I thought family meant obligation. I thought it meant enduring abuse because you shared a last name. I thought it meant setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. I was wrong. Family is not DNA. Family is not a birthright. Family are the people who spot your potential when you feel invisible. Family are the people who cheer for your name when you enter a room, not because they want something from you, but because they are simply happy you are there. Family are the people who respect your boundaries and celebrate your strength. I had lost a mother and a sister. I had lost a fiancé. But as Julian spun me around on the dance floor, surrounded by colleagues who respected me and friends who valued me, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I had simply pruned the dead branches from my tree so the healthy ones could finally breathe. I looked over Julian's shoulder at the glass reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was smiling. It wasn't the shy, apologetic smile of the girl in the hoodie. It wasn't the cold, predatory smile of the woman in the boardroom. It was the smile of a woman who was whole. I am Amara Jones. I am an orphan by circumstance, but a queen by choice. And as the music played on, I knew that the best chapters of my life were not the ones I had written in ink and tears, but the ones I was about to write in laughter and freedom. The screen fades to black, but the music continues playing a song of triumph. This story serves as a powerful reminder that toxic behavior should never be tolerated simply because it comes from family. Amara's journey teaches us that our worth is not defined by how much we can give to others or how much abuse we can endure. True self-respect means having the courage to set boundaries and the strength to walk away from anyone who weaponizes your love against you. We learn that financial independence is a form of freedom and that sometimes you have to dismantle the life you thought you wanted to build the life you truly deserve. If you have ever had to choose your own peace over your family's expectations, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this story with someone who needs to know that it is okay to walk away and start over. Let me know in the comments below, have you ever had to fire a family member from your life? I want to hear your truth. Thanks for watching.